The massive space station called Kepler rotated slowly around a distant star that belonged to no one. Every year, hundreds of alien ships came here for the biggest meeting in the galaxy. This was the 847th Galactic Assembly, where creatures from over 200 different worlds gathered to talk about who owned what and who could trade with whom. Ambassador Zixathala stood in the main meeting hall, her crystal body catching the light from 1,000 stars visible through the clear walls. She had been running these meetings for over 300 years, which was still young for her people. The Vorthans had been traveling between stars for 50,000 years, making them one of the oldest and most respected races in the galaxy. Around the giant circular room, delegates from many worlds sat in their special seats. Each race needed different things to stay alive, so the station provided whatever air, heat, or gravity they required. The tall, thin Mokari breathed methane gas and kept to their sealed section. The rock-like Grindari needed extreme heat and sat near the fusion generators. The floating ethereals needed almost no gravity at all and drifted above everyone else. Zixathala looked at her datapad and saw the usual business for today. The Zelkari Confederation wanted to expand their territory again. The Mokari Republic complained about trade taxes. 3 smaller races argued about mining rights in the outer spiral. Nothing new or exciting had happened in galactic politics for over 1,000 years. The galaxy had rules that everyone understood. Young races that just learned to travel between stars always started the same way. First, they built slow ships that took years to reach nearby systems. Then they developed better engines and started exploring further. After a few hundred years, they might be strong enough to join the assembly as junior members. After a few thousand years, they could become real powers. It always worked this way. Zixathala was about to call the meeting to order when her assistant brought her an urgent message. A signal had come from a system the star charts called Sol. The message asked for permission to send a delegate to the assembly. This surprised her because the Sol system had only been discovered recently. The race there had achieved faster-than-light travel just 127 years ago. She shared this information with the other senior delegates. Most of them laughed. 127 years was nothing. Such a young race would have tiny ships and basic technology. They probably wanted to beg for protection or ask for help with some simple problem. The Zelkari delegate, a large creature with 6 arms and metal plates covering his skin, made a dismissive gesture. His name was War Leader Krath, and he had conquered 17 star systems for his people. He spoke in the common galactic language that all space-traveling races eventually learned. "Why waste time with primitives?" Krath said. "They probably still use chemical rockets and think fusion power is advanced technology. Let them play with the other children races." Several other delegates agreed. The ethereal representative, a being made of pure energy contained in a glowing sphere, pulsed with amusement. "In our experience, races this young can barely maintain life support on their ships. They pose no threat and offer nothing of value." But Zixathala felt curious about these humans, as they called themselves. The galaxy had not seen a new race achieve faster-than-light travel in over 200 years. Most planets either never developed intelligent life or their civilizations destroyed themselves before reaching the stars. The few that made it to space usually followed predictable patterns. "We will allow them to attend," she announced. "Cosmic law requires us to hear all voices, no matter how small." The other delegates seemed bored by this decision. The Grindari representative, whose people resembled living mountains, spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "Very well. We will listen to their primitive concerns for a few minutes, then return to important matters." Zixathala sent the approval message back to the Sol system. The reply came faster than expected, which meant these humans had reasonably good communication technology. They thanked the assembly for the opportunity and said their representative would arrive in 3 standard days. Over the next few days, the assembly continued its normal business. The Zelkari Confederation presented their case for expanding into uninhabited systems. Several other races pointed out that these systems actually contained primitive civilizations that the Zelkari simply planned to remove. This led to the usual arguments about the rights of species that had not yet achieved space travel. War Leader Krath argued that his people brought civilization to backward worlds. We offer technology, medicine, and proper government to races that still fight with sticks and stones. Some resistance is expected, but they benefit in the long run. Other delegates had heard this argument many times before. The Zelkari had a long history of taking what they wanted and calling it progress. But they were strong enough that few races challenged them directly. The galaxy had learned to accept certain levels of aggression from powerful civilizations. As the third day approached, some delegates wondered what kind of ship these humans would bring. Probably something small and crude, maybe carrying a dozen. Scared diplomats who would beg for protection from stronger races. New species always wanted the same things: trade agreements, technology exchanges, and promises that bigger civilizations would not attack them. The morning arrived when the human delegate was scheduled to appear. Most of the assembly paid little attention, focusing instead on the important business of territorial disputes and trade regulations. Zixthala checked her instruments and saw no sign of approaching ships. Then the station's warning systems activated. Every alarm on Kepler Station started screaming at once. The sound echoed through the corridors and meeting halls, causing panic among delegates who had never heard such warnings during peaceful assembly sessions. Emergency lights bathed everything. In red as automated systems detected something massive approaching through hyperspace. Zixthala rushed to the main control center, her crystal body reflecting the flashing warning signals. The station's sensors showed readings that made no sense. Something enormous was about to emerge from faster-than-light travel, but the energy signature matched nothing in their databases of known ship designs. The Makari technician operating. The detection systems looked confused as he studied his instruments. His people had been monitoring space traffic for thousands of years, and every race used similar principles for their faster-than-light engines. But this approaching vessel generated power patterns that seemed impossible. The energy output is beyond our measurement scale, the technician reported, his voice shaking. Whatever is coming produces more power than some of our battle fleets combined. War Leader Krath pushed his way into the control center, his metal armor clanking against the walls. As the military commander of the Zelkari forces in this sector, he took charge during emergencies. His 6 arms moved quickly over the weapon control panels as he prepared the station's defenses. Probably a malfunction in their primitive engines, Krath said, though his voice carried less confidence than his words suggested. Young races often lose control of their ships and crash into things. But the ethereal delegate had also arrived, and her energy form pulsed with growing alarm. Her people could sense things that others missed, and she detected something that frightened her ancient mind. "This is no accident," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made everyone feel uneasy. "What approaches moves with purpose and control. The beings aboard that vessel know exactly what they are doing." Space itself began to tear open at the edge of the Kepler system. The fabric of reality twisted and bulged as something forced its way through from hyperspace. Stars seemed to bend around the emergence point, and gravitational waves rippled outward at the speed of light. Then the ship appeared. The vessel that emerged from hyperspace was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. It stretched over 2 kilometers from nose to tail, its hull black as the space between stars. Strange geometric patterns covered its surface, and weapon ports bristled along its entire length like the spines of some deep space predator. Most shocking of all was the obvious damage the ship had taken. Scorch marks from energy weapons covered sections of its armor. Entire portions of the hull showed signs of recent repairs. This was not the pristine vessel of a peaceful diplomatic mission. This was a warship that had been fighting. The gravitational waves from the ship's emergence reached Kepler Station and shook the massive structure like a child's toy. Delegates throughout the station felt the vibrations through their feet and grabbed onto whatever they could find for support. Some of the smaller races were thrown to the ground by the unexpected force. "Impossible," whispered the Grindari representative, his mountain-like body actually trembling. "No ship that size should be able to generate such effects during emergence. The power requirements alone would drain the energy output of an entire star." The human ship moved with surprising grace for something so massive. Its engines produced a blue glow that seemed to pulse with controlled fusion reactions far more advanced than anything the assembly had seen from such a young civilization. The vessel approached Kepler Station at a steady pace, neither rushing nor hesitating. Then it began transmitting. The message came in 17 different galactic languages, Each one pronounced perfectly despite the fact that humans had supposedly only encountered galactic civilization moments ago. The voice was calm, professional, and carried an authority that made even veteran diplomats pay attention. Kepler Station Control, this is Captain Jake Collins commanding the Terran Naval Ship Defender. We request docking permission for diplomatic consultation regarding recent aggressive actions by the Zelkari Confederation against human colonies. We have aboard diplomatic staff and security personnel as allowed under Galactic Assembly protocols. Silence filled the control center. Every delegate stared at the communication equipment as if it had betrayed them. The implications of what they had just heard began to sink into their minds like acid through metal. First, these humans had not only achieved faster-than-light travel, but had built warships that dwarfed most military vessels in the galaxy. Second, they were already engaged in warfare with the Zelkari Confederation, one of the major powers in this region of space. Third, they spoke of human colonies, suggesting their expansion had already begun in earnest. War leader Krath tried to maintain his composure, but his metal plates had changed color to a deep red that indicated extreme stress among his people. The Zelkari had been conducting what they called expansion operations against primitive worlds for the past 2 years. But those worlds were supposed to contain helpless civilizations with no space-traveling capability. There must be some mistake, Krath said, though his voice lacked conviction. My people have encountered no significant resistance in our recent operations. These humans must be confused about who attacked their colonies. The ethereal delegate's energy form flickered with what her people considered laughter, but the sound carried no humor. War leader, I suspect your people have made a terrible miscalculation about the nature of their recent enemies. Zixthala forced herself to respond to the human ship's request. As chair of the assembly, she had handled thousands of diplomatic situations, but none had ever begun with a damaged warship the size of a small moon asking permission to dock. Captain Collins, this is Ambassador Zixthala of the Galactic Assembly. You are cleared for docking at Base 7. Please be aware that Kepler Station is neutral territory and all weapons must remain powered down during your visit. The response came immediately, and again the professionalism in the human captain's voice struck everyone who heard it. This was not some primitive leader overwhelmed by his first contact with galactic civilization. This was a military commander, accustomed to giving and receiving orders in life-or-death situations. Understood, Ambassador. Our weapons will remain in standby mode only. However, I must inform you that TNS Defender maintains full defensive capabilities at all times due to current threat conditions. We appreciate the Assembly's willingness to hear our concerns. As the massive human warship approached the docking bay, delegates throughout Kepler Station began making urgent communications with their home governments. The carefully maintained balance of galactic power had just been shattered by the emergence of a species that should have been centuries away from building such vessels. The universe had become a much more dangerous place. The docking process took longer than expected because Kepler Station's largest bay could barely accommodate the human warship. The TNS Defender had to maneuver carefully to avoid damaging the station's structural supports, and even then, nearly half of the vessel remained outside in open space. Ambassador Zixthala waited in the main diplomatic chamber with the other senior delegates. Everyone pretended to review their notes and data pads, but she could see the tension in every gesture and movement. The Mokari delegate kept adjusting his breathing apparatus, while the Grindari representative had changed color to the dark gray that indicated serious concern among his people. War leader Krath stood apart from the others, his 6 arms checking and rechecking his ceremonial weapons. The Zelkari warrior looked ready for battle, though station protocols prevented him from carrying anything more dangerous than a ceremonial blade. His metal plates had shifted to deep orange, which meant he was preparing for potential combat. When the humans finally arrived, they entered the chamber in a formation that made every military delegate in the room take notice. Captain Jake Collins walked in front, wearing a dark blue uniform covered with insignia that suggested extensive combat experience. Behind him came Dr. Lisa Murphy, a woman with sharp eyes who carried herself like someone accustomed to handling dangerous negotiations. But what really caught everyone's attention were the 6 human soldiers who accompanied them. These Marines wore full combat armor that looked both practical and intimidating. Their weapons remained holstered, but experienced warriors could tell these humans were ready to fight at a moment's notice. The lead Marine, whose name tag read, Torres, moved with the fluid confidence of a veteran killer. Captain Collins stepped forward and nodded respectfully to Ambassador Zixthala. When he spoke, his voice carried the same calm authority they had heard over the communication system. Ambassador, thank you for allowing us to present our case to the Assembly. I am Captain Jake Collins of the Terran Naval Service. This is Dr. Lisa Murphy, our Chief Diplomatic Officer, and Commander Alex Stone, our military attaché. Zixthala studied the humans carefully. They looked remarkably similar to several other species in the galaxy, but with subtle differences that suggested either parallel evolution or something more mysterious. Their eyes held an intelligence that seemed older than their civilization's brief history in space. Captain Collins, welcome to Kepler Station. The Assembly is curious to hear from such a young civilization that has apparently achieved remarkable technological advancement in a very short time. Dr. Murphy stepped forward, and when she began to speak, it became clear that human understanding of galactic politics was far more sophisticated than anyone had expected. She presented detailed information about trade routes, military alliances, and political relationships between dozens of species. Her knowledge included details that many delegates thought were secret. The human government has been monitoring galactic communications for the past 43 years, Dr. Murphy explained. We have observed the political dynamics of this region and understand the current territorial disputes and economic pressures affecting various civilizations. The ethereal delegate's energy form pulsed with surprise. How did your people gain access to secure communications channels that require advanced encryption technology? Commander Stone answered with a slight smile that made several delegates uncomfortable. Human cryptography developed along different lines than galactic standard. We found your encryption methods interesting but not particularly challenging to decode. This statement caused a stir throughout the chamber. Secure communications formed the backbone of galactic civilization, and the idea that a primitive species could casually break their codes suggested technological capabilities that defied explanation. War leader Krath decided to take control of the situation before these humans could present whatever lies they planned to tell about Zelkari expansion operations. He stepped forward, his metal armor clanking ominously. These claims are obviously false, Krath declared. My people have been conducting standard expansion protocols in uninhabited systems. If humans were present on those worlds, they were primitive colonists with no legal claim to the territory. Captain Collins turned to face the Zelkari war leader, and something in his expression made the experienced warrior take an involuntary step backward. The human captain's eyes held the cold certainty of someone who had seen too much death. War leader Krath, I have personally witnessed the aftermath of your standard expansion protocols on 3 human colonies, 2 million civilians dead on. New Austin, 400,000 on Terra Nova, the entire population of Haven Colony wiped out by orbital bombardment. Dr. Murphy activated a holographic projector that filled the center of the chamber with images that made several delegates gasp in horror. The recordings showed cities reduced to radioactive ash, orbital defense platforms torn apart by weapons fire, and rescue ships pulling survivors from the wreckage of civilian transports. These recordings were made by human rescue vessels arriving after Zelkari forces withdrew, Dr. Murphy explained. Each attack followed the same pattern. Zelkari ships would demand immediate surrender and evacuation. When human colonists requested time to gather their families and possessions, the attacks would begin. The evidence was overwhelming and clearly authentic. The tactical displays showed Zelkari ship signatures, weapon patterns, and communication, frequencies that matched official military records. Several delegates began to realize that they were witnessing documentation of systematic war crimes. War leader Krath tried to maintain his aggressive posture, but doubt had begun to creep into his voice. Those were legitimate military operations against hostile forces. My intelligence reports indicated significant military presence on those worlds. Commander Stone laughed, and the sound carried no humor at all. Your intelligence reports were wrong, war leader. Those colonies had minimal defensive capabilities. The strongest weapons they possessed were mining charges and civilian hunting rifles. Ambassador Zixthala felt the situation spiraling beyond her control. The Assembly had rules for handling disputes between member species, but this was something entirely different. The humans were presenting evidence of unprovoked attacks by a major galactic power against what should have been helpless civilians. "Captain Collins," she said carefully, "these are serious accusations. How has your civilization responded to these attacks?" The human captain's answer sent a chill through every delegate in the chamber. "We fought back, Ambassador, and we won." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the Mokari delegate's breathing apparatus working harder as his stress levels increased. The implications of Captain Collins's statement were staggering. A civilization barely over a century old claimed to have defeated military forces from one of the galaxy's established powers. War leader Krath's metal plates had turned bright red, indicating rage mixed with growing fear. "Impossible. My forces have encountered only primitive resistance, a few small ships with basic weapons." Dr. Murphy consulted her datapad and looked up with an expression of polite interest. "War leader, when did you last receive communications from Battlegroup Talon, Battlegroup Claw, or the 3rd Expansion Fleet?" The question hit the Zelkari commander like a physical blow. Those 3 battle groups represented over 200 warships and 50,000 elite Zelkari warriors. They had been conducting expansion operations for 18 months with regular success reports. But now that the human diplomat mentioned it, those reports had stopped coming 6 weeks ago. War leader Krath's silence answered Dr. Murphy's question better than any words could have. The Zelkari commander stood frozen as the terrible possibility began to sink into his mind. 3 entire battle groups represented the core of Zelkari military power in this sector. Their loss would be a catastrophe beyond imagination. Ambassador Zixthala demanded proof of these extraordinary claims. The assembly moved to a secure briefing room where Captain Collins and Commander Stone could present detailed information, without violating military security protocols. The evidence they provided changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Commander Stone activated a 3-dimensional tactical display that showed the Battle of Proxima Station in complete detail. The human military attaché spoke with the calm precision of a professional soldier describing routine operations. 6 weeks ago, Admiral Kate Russell received intelligence that Zelkari forces were massing for an attack on our primary research facility. The enemy fleet consisted of 38 ships, including 2 heavy cruisers and a battle carrier. Admiral Russell had 12 ships available for defense. The alien delegates studied the tactical display with growing amazement. The numbers should have made the battle a massacre, but the human ships moved with coordination and precision that defied their supposed technological limitations. Worse, their weapons appeared to outrange and outpower Zelkari military technology by significant margins. "The engagement lasted 4 hours and 27 minutes, Stone continued. Zelkari forces attempted a standard encirclement maneuver, but human ships demonstrated superior speed and maneuverability. Captain Tom Bradley led Squadron 3 in a flanking attack while Admiral Russell coordinated the main defensive line. The battle recording showed human vessels using tactics that combined elements from dozens of different military traditions. They fought like veterans who had been perfecting their skills for centuries, not like novices experiencing their first major space battle." Dr. Pete Johnson, the human xenobiologist who had joined the briefing, provided analysis that disturbed everyone who heard it. His specialty was understanding how different species approached warfare, and his conclusions painted a terrifying picture of human military potential. "Humans develop new weapons technology during active combat," Johnson explained. "Other species design their military equipment in peacetime and hope it will work when fighting begins. Humans treat warfare as a continuous problem-solving exercise where every battle provides data for improvement." The Grindari delegate asked the question that everyone was thinking. How is such rapid development possible? Our civilizations require decades to test and implement new military technologies. Commander Jane Martinez, the human intelligence officer, answered with information that made the alien delegates reconsider everything they thought they knew about technological development. "Human industrial capacity operates differently than galactic standard," Martinez said. "When we declared a state of war 18 months ago, Earth's entire manufacturing base converted to military production within 6 months. We currently have over 4 billion humans working in war-related industries." The number was staggering. Most galactic civilizations maintained military industries that employed perhaps 1% of their population during peacetime. The idea of an entire world dedicating half its people to warfare suggested a level of social organization and resource mobilization that seemed impossible. Chief Engineer Ron Davis provided technical details about human manufacturing capabilities that violated everything the galaxy understood about industrial development. Human factories could design, test, and produce new weapons systems in time frames that should have been physically impossible. The TNS Defender represents our 7th generation of capital ship design, Davis explained. Each generation incorporates lessons learned from actual combat experience. We started building this ship 14 months ago, and it includes technologies that did not exist when the war began. Ambassador Zix Thala felt reality shifting around her as she tried to process this information. The humans were claiming that they had developed and built capital ships faster than most civilizations could upgrade their communications equipment. War leader Krath finally found his voice, though it shook with emotions he was struggling to control. Even if your claims are true, the Zelkari Confederation includes 17 star systems and maintains alliance agreements with 43 other species. You cannot fight the entire galaxy, Captain Collins answered, with a statement that froze every delegate in the room. War leader, we are not fighting the entire galaxy. We are fighting 4 species in formal alliance with the Zelkari Confederation, plus 11 others that have provided material support to your operations. So far, we have achieved victory in every major engagement. Dr. Murphy provided strategic analysis that demonstrated human understanding of galactic politics at a level that surpassed most senior diplomats. The humans had identified every species, involved in anti-human operations, tracked their supply lines, and developed specific plans for dealing with each potential threat. The Mokari Republic provided sensor data to Zelkari forces, Murphy said, looking directly at the Mokari delegate. The Vrex Collective supplied advanced torpedoes. The Hive clusters offered logistical support through their trade networks. We know exactly who has helped our enemies and why. The Mokari delegate tried to protest, but Murphy continued with evidence that proved human intelligence capabilities reached into the highest levels of galactic government. They had intercepted communications, identified secret agreements, and penetrated security systems that were supposed to be impossible to breach. Commander Stone returned to the tactical analysis with information about recent battles that painted a picture of systematic Zelkari defeat. Human forces had not simply won defensive engagements, they had begun launching offensive operations that struck deep into enemy territory. 2 weeks ago, Captain Sarah Williams led a raid on the Zelkari military shipyard at Ravens Point, Stone reported. Her squadron destroyed 47 ships under construction and eliminated the system's primary manufacturing capability. Total human casualties were 0. The implications were clear to every military mind in the room. The humans had achieved the kind of tactical superiority that allowed them to conduct offensive operations in heavily defended enemy territory without taking losses. This suggested not just superior technology, but superior training, intelligence, and strategic planning. War leader Krath made one final attempt to maintain his position. Your species may have achieved some early successes through surprise and primitive cunning, but you cannot sustain warfare against civilizations with thousands of years of military experience. Dr. Johnson answered with psychological analysis that revealed the fundamental difference between human and galactic approaches to conflict. His words carried implications that made even veteran warriors feel uneasy. War leader, human military. Doctrine assumes that every conflict will be a fight for survival. We do not prepare for limited engagements or negotiated settlements. When humans go to war, they plan to completely destroy their enemy's ability to threaten them ever again. The room fell silent as delegates considered what this meant. Most galactic conflicts involved limited objectives and negotiated conclusions. The idea of a species that approached warfare as a total commitment to victory or extinction suggested a level of determination that civilized races had difficulty understanding. Captain Collins concluded the briefing with a statement that summarized the new reality facing the galaxy. The Terran government sent me here to offer one final opportunity for peaceful resolution. We will accept nothing less than complete cessation of hostilities, full reparations for damages to human colonies, and formal recognition of human territorial claims. The alternative is continued warfare until our enemies no longer possess the ability to threaten human lives. Ambassador Zixathala realized that the galaxy had encountered something unprecedented. These humans were not seeking membership in galactic civilization. They were demanding recognition as an equal power with the strength to enforce their demands. The emergency session of the Galactic Assembly began at dawn, station time. Representatives from over 200 species gathered in the Great Chamber, but the mood was unlike anything Ambassador Zixathala had experienced in her 3 centuries of diplomatic service. Fear hung in the air like a poisonous gas. Word of the human briefing had spread throughout Kepler Station within hours. Delegates who had initially dismissed these newcomers as primitive colonists now understood they were facing a military power that could reshape the galaxy through force alone. Emergency communications flew between the station and dozens of homeworlds as governments tried to understand what humanity's emergence meant for their own survival. The Mokari delegate sat slumped in his specialized chair, his breathing apparatus, working overtime as stress hormones flooded his system. His government had already contacted him with urgent questions about their covert support for Zelkari expansion operations. The humans clearly knew about those arrangements, and the Mokari leadership was desperately trying to calculate whether they could avoid becoming targets. War leader Krath looked like a warrior who had seen his entire world crumble. Overnight, he had received confirmation that the human claims were accurate. Battle Group Talon, Battle Group Claw, and the Third Expansion Fleet had indeed been destroyed. Over 200 ships and 50,000 of the Confederation's best. Warriors were gone, eliminated by a species that barely understood galactic politics 6 months ago. The ethereal delegate floated near the chamber's ceiling, her energy form pulsing with patterns that indicated deep contemplation. Her people were among the oldest in the galaxy, and their long perspective allowed them to see historical patterns that others missed. She had recognized something in the human presentation that frightened her ancient mind. Captain Collins and Dr. Murphy sat in the section reserved for petitioning species, but their posture suggested they were not supplicants begging for favors. The human captain wore the same calm expression he had maintained throughout the crisis, while Dr. Murphy reviewed her notes with the confidence of someone who knew exactly how this session would end. Ambassador Zixathala called the session to order, though her crystal voice carried unusual stress harmonics. The situation had moved far beyond normal diplomatic protocols, and she was improvising procedures for circumstances no one had ever imagined. The Assembly will now consider the petition presented by the human delegation, she announced. Captain Collins, please state your government's formal position. The human captain stood and spoke with the authority of someone representing a major galactic power, though his civilization had been unknown to most delegates just days earlier. The Terran government demands immediate cessation of all hostile activities by the Zelkari Confederation and their allies. We require formal recognition of human territorial claims in the Sol Sector and adjacent systems. Finally, we demand reparations totaling 4 billion galactic standard credits for damages inflicted on human civilian populations. The numbers were staggering. 4 billion credits represented the entire economic output of most star systems for several years. The demands would bankrupt the Zelkari Confederation and seriously damage their allies' economies. War leader Krath tried one final desperate gambit. He stood and activated his ceremonial armor's voice amplification system, making his words echo throughout the chamber. The Assembly cannot allow primitives to dictate terms to established civilizations, he declared. If we yield to these demands, every minor species will think they can challenge their betters through violence. Dr. Murphy responded with information that destroyed Krath's argument and terrified every delegate who heard it. War leader, you continue to think of humanity as a minor species. Let me clarify our actual position. The Terran government currently maintains a fleet of 47 capital ships, each comparable to TNS Defender. Our industrial capacity produces 12 new warships every month. Our population of 8 billion humans includes over 600 million active military personnel. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the Grindari delegate's rocky body grinding against itself as stress affected his crystalline structure. The numbers Dr. Murphy had provided described a military machine larger than most. Galactic alliances could assemble. The ethereal delegate descended from the ceiling, her energy form pulsing with urgent communication patterns. When she spoke, Her words carried the weight of 50,000 years of galactic observation. Honored delegates, we are witnessing the emergence of a new type of civilization. The humans do not follow standard development patterns because they approach existence differently than other species. They treat challenges as opportunities for growth, rather than obstacles to avoid. Ambassador Zixathala knew the moment had come for decision. The Assembly could no longer pretend this was a minor diplomatic incident involving a primitive species. The humans represented a fundamental shift in galactic power relationships, and how the Assembly responded would determine the future of interstellar civilization. The Assembly will now vote on formal recognition of human territorial claims and cessation of hostilities, she announced. All in favor? The vote was not even close. 193 species voted to recognize human demands. Only the Zelkari Confederation and 6 of their closest allies voted against the measure. The message was clear. The galaxy chose accommodation over confrontation with humanity. War leader Krath's metal plates had turned the deep black that indicated despair among his people. The Confederation would have to pay ruinous reparations and abandon their expansion plans. Worse, they would have to explain to their people how they had lost 3 battle groups to a species most Zelkari had never heard of. But the vote was only the beginning. Captain Collins stood again and made a statement that completed humanity's transformation from unknown primitives to galactic power. The Terran government appreciates the Assembly's wisdom in recognizing reality. However, we want to make our position completely clear. Humanity will defend itself against any threat, regardless of its source or size. We prefer peace, but we are very, very good at war. Dr. Murphy added the diplomatic language that made humanity's message unmistakable. To every government in the galaxy, Earth is prepared to establish normal diplomatic and trade relationships with all species that respect human sovereignty. We look forward to contributing to galactic civilization as equal partners. The session ended with formal procedures for implementing the Assembly's decision, but everyone understood the real meaning of what had just occurred. A new apex predator had emerged in the galaxy, and existing power structures would have to adapt or face extinction. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, many were already composing urgent messages to their governments. Trade representatives wanted to negotiate agreements with this wealthy new civilization. Military leaders needed to assess whether their own forces could survive conflict with human warships. Politicians had to recalculate their strategic positions now that the balance of power had shifted so dramatically. Ambassador Zixathala watched the TNS Defender undock from Kepler Station and disappear into hyperspace. The massive warship left, behind a galaxy that would never be the same. Humanity had announced itself not as students seeking guidance from elder civilizations, but as teachers prepared to give lessons in power. The age of human expansion had begun, and the rest of the galaxy would have to learn to live with neighbors who treated warfare as just another engineering problem to be solved.